All right, we'll
Well,
post it on our, we have a YouTube channel, so we'll post it on that.
Oh, right on, right on. Well,
um,
how's everybody doing?
great, great.
Good.
Ryan, my name is Henry. I'm the president of the club. So
All right.
I was I was looking at your website, and it was telling me that you grew up in the Keys and
Yes, sir.
fished with your father. Tell us a little bit about yourself and I guess
All
you're
right. I was born and raised in Homestead, grew up fishing the Keys most of my life, and left for school. I was actually following a college golf career and turned pro for a little bit, and but missed fishing. So I came back and started hitting even more and understanding the park and what it has to offer, and took it from there and started to do that on the side, and then became a fireman. So now I get fun stuff, you know. But I do a lot of mostly inshore, whether it's fly fishing, jig, or bait. And then I also do some offshore. I have another guy that runs a lot of offshore with me to see the best of both worlds. You know, with the water quality nowadays, tomorrow in the park's never guaranteed. You know,
right.
and you got to find. I find out now the fishing's really good. The fishing's better than it was last year, but you're starting to see a lot of different water and grass die off and algae blooms again. You know, so that will decide the fate of that fishery. I think, you know, I think it will bounce back, but so you're seeing that growing up. That was never like that, you know.
Right.
It was beautiful.
I used to fish flamingo when I was a teenager, and
Yeah.
you never saw that, and it was
No.
beautiful.
100 schools of red, slayed up snook, tarpon everywhere. Nowadays, I mean, the school of fish are still around. They're just not like they were in 2006 and 15, I think, as well. They're slowly coming back. They were congregated in one area. Now they're kind of like spread out. Now they're not all together like they were a couple years ago. So I see that changing. But yeah, I fish everywhere. I mean, my boat's on a trailer, so I pretty much travel everywhere in Florida. You know, with the days off that I have, and if I don't have clients, I go and explore. Chokoloskee, I've been fishing there a lot lately, just to learn it because I was so afraid running it when I was a kid. You know, all you hear is the guys.
We lost you a little bit.
He's on the road.
He's at the road, right?
Jeff here. All right, you guys hear
All
me
right.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're actually on our way to Myrtle Beach.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
Snook
she's
run?
driving. She's my pilot today. She's driving. But
Ryan, do you fish? What do you think? Do you fish Biscayne Bay at all?
I fish. I go out there a little bit, not as much as I probably should. I'm colorblind, so those bonefish are always really tough for me to see. Usually, I'll go out there when I have clients getting ready to go out to go bone fishing to try to figure out where they're at. You know, and if it's a hardcore bone fishing guide, I usually try to send them to some of the local guys that are really good at it, you know. That's something I targeted most of my life, and I didn't catch one until a couple of years ago, and I caught 14 in one day, and I was like, this is so awesome. And took the guys out from Costa del Mar, and they caught 7 double headers. And after that, it's you know, being in Miami, that's one of the hardest places to fish because you have not only the water and the fishery is different, is the boat traffic is just unbelievable, you know, and then fighting at the marinas, that's what I try to stay away from, you know.
Yeah.
So bone fishing, I'll try to stay in Alamorada. And there's a lot of places in Biscayne to fish for bonefish, but they're not very. They have these flats that like what we call 1 boat flats, 2 boat flats. There's a lot of flats there that are 1 boat areas, you know, where you run to the feather beds and someone's already staked out on top, you know. So that area is his, you know.
Right.
So that's one thing that makes it even tougher there is if you have 10 guides out pulling for bonefish, you're pretty much whoever gets there first, you know?
Right.
But-
Speaking of, I mean, schooling fish, last time we went to Whitewater, there was tarpon everywhere. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, we'll get the push of tarpon and whitewater, like that late winter time area, right before, because what they do is they come down I followed them this year, being out of Naples a lot, and they come down the coast and they punch up into whitewater for that warmer water, and they kind of daisy chain there, and then once they leave there, they start their migration further south. And this year, it was never like the last couple of years. They were so thick in there that you literally throw a top water and they'll blow it out of the water. You know, this year, targeting tarpon down in Alamorada before COVID happened, probably around March, a little bit of February. I was already having tarpon and not strings of tarpon Oceanside, but I was already finding them Bayside and Alamorada, which was nice to have them to yourself for a little bit. But they weren't as thick as they are last month, you know.
Right.
But they'll push in there. I think this year with the weather, they've been staying later and later every season, so that kind of thrown off their whole migratory pattern, I think. But they've been seeing a lot of schools of black drum up on the coast too, especially on the rivers. One of the guys that I fished with and a guide, David Stutz, was on a big group of black drum coming out of one of the rivers not too long ago. And that's good to see. They go out on the low tide and come back in on high tide.
Mhm.
Well, as we're starting to
Okay. Right.
get into the fall, well, who knows what we're gonna get, but what patterns, how do they change, and how do you start fishing in Flamingo?
Okay, so me, it's if I'm not pulling for me, I'll pull year round on the flats, and you'll find laid up snook and redfish. But I notice everything's tidal. You know, you hear wintertime on the coast is good. Wintertime, the coast fishing is good year round. There is hot spots during the winter that are awesome, you know, but I fish those regularly with clients because it's something easy to go out and fish a tide, catch, 40 redfish, snook, and some trout and black drum, and they're happy. So coming into fall with the heat, they're still on top of the flats, but targeting those tides. You know, I noticed fishing up in Chucko, it's very tide dependent. So that outgoing tide, if you find an outgoing tide anywhere, those fish are happy. You know, a high outgoing, mostly I'll do the points, little creeks, and then on incoming, you can fish it. You just change your tactics now you're anchored up on the outside fishing it coming in. You know, you'll see a lot of guys in Lake Ingram, it's East Cape Canal. You know, you'll see them jump around and they're sitting there one morning, then the next morning they're in a different spots because the tide's different there. So like East Cape fall time, as soon as that water starts chilling out, you fish East Cape on an outgoing anywhere in East Cape Canal, and it's shrimp and a jig head on the bottom, working it slowly, black drum and redfish, and sometimes snook. And there's been a lot of tarpon in there. They've been catching them left and right there. It's not something you go there and target all the time, but they're there. There's a lot of jewfish in there. I think the jewfish have really made a comeback. We start catching a lot of them on the coast now, which they're fun. They tend to be a little nuisance because they're eating everything in their path. But they're fun to catch, a little bycatch for especially young anglers. But as far as patterns like tarpon patterns, I won't really target them as much unless it's your micro poons, like your 40 pounders and lower. They won't leave. They'll be up in the back bays and like Coop Bay, sometimes in whitewater. Like Jason's fishing, catching those tarpon on the coast. They're not everywhere. They're very slim pickings, but you just got, it's so picky when it comes to wind and tide. Everything's got to be perfect. As soon as the fall comes, the snook season opens up, and I feel like the snook know its seasons open up because they'll start to not bite as much. at least the big boys, But soon as I start seeing the temperature change, that fishing was going to light up. I already noticed it on the coast a couple of days ago, the amount of white bait that's out on the coast. It's unbelievable. More bait this year than I saw last year.
Wow.
Little finger mullet, tons of pilchards. I had 2 young kids the other day, one of the fireman's kids I took, and up on Highland Beach, he caught a redfish, released them, and the other brother was throwing a fluke, and a redfish jumped out of the water like a tarpon and ate the fluke. And I've never seen a redfish go airborne. But they were sitting there feeding, blowing up on all these bait, and we're like, man, we're not catching anything. But because the bait was plentiful, they could eat whatever they want. And we finally got hooked into a couple of them, and they were big redfish. They were really belly fat. So that was pretty cool to see a redfish like that. Usually we have slender ones, and they don't have any girth to them. But and the snook, the tide was kind of messed up. It was supposed to be outgoing, and that west wind kind of pushed the water even higher, which made it really tough on that coastline. When that water gets super high, you don't really have this fish. You're kind of stuck fishing areas that are like 8 feet back in the tree line, because you can hear them popping back there, but you can't get to them. So that's why, like, when it's outgoing on the coast, I tend, especially this summer, I tend to fish tides. If it's outgoing, I got a strong outgoing with an east wind, I know I'm going to be out. I need to be at that spot an hour to 2 hours earlier before it starts to run out, because it's going to run out fast. And it gives me that good 4-hour window of fishing that's going to be phenomenal. And then after that, call it a day. Just because it's so hot this summer. I mean, it's not even September yet, And we feel it, and those fish feel it. Surprisingly, but they'll eat on that tide. The other day it was 12 o'clock, and they were feeding. So I feel like if that tide's moving, that water's cooling down, and they love it. But
you mainly well, I know that you go whenever you can when you have a charter. I usually like to pattern myself after strong tides, new moon, all that stuff. When I see a lot of water movement, that makes a big difference.
oh yeah.
The other day in Whitewater, the stronger tide was the incoming. Sure enough, when the tide started pouring in, even we saw some beautiful water along the shoreline, and it was actually moving. Unfortunately, some storms came up, lightning and stuff, so we had to go in. But right then and there, it was just starting to turn on. I mean, you could just see and I knew that was the incoming tide. It was a stronger tide, and that the fish would definitely turn on. So
oh yeah.
Do you factor in the moon phases too, and when it's over and under, or?
That's I've heard like my dad, when we hunt, we do that same thing. Like your major feed, your minor feeds, is sun over the moon. I see sometimes I can see that we have fish days that are good. Do I track it? Not as much, because when we get booked for trips, we're going,
Right.
So, but I do. My big thing is tide. I'm very tidal, which most guys, you think we don't really have a tide here compared to like Boston and all these other places. But the little bit of tide that we have, those fish feel it, So and it changes your tactics, On a high outgoing on a flat, those fish are happy. They're moseying off the flat, but they're eating things as they go. So you're gonna catch them up. And then incoming, they're doing the same thing, but the opposite direction. So they're presenting a different way, like on the bottom. But as far as the moon, now, like if it's a full moon, still when I go out fishing, I know I have like a 2-hour window before those fish kind of shut down. Especially if the tide's not right. If you get out there early enough, those snook, tarpon, they're gonna eat. They're feeding. But around that 10 o'clock time, that's when you'll notice, it's a little slowed down a little bit. But around 3 or 4, it'll pick back up, but sometimes it still will be good as long as you find that tide too. You know, there's certain areas that those fish just congregate and they don't really leave it. You know, and once you find those, I feel like my spots that help me out is the ones that are the fish never really leave the pockets. They always stay there in the pockets in the creeks, deeper little pockets on low tide. They hang out there. You know, once you find those spots, it helps when it comes to, hey, we got a day where it's full moon and fishing slow, but the fish are still there. You know, so not as much as I use it in hunting. You know, so. But yeah, big thing for me is tide. Wind is a good one, like a west wind. And some of the older guys, my dad would tell me, wind out of the west, stay home and rest. But I've had days out of the west when the fishing, you know. But now I've noticed, like, if it's west wind and it's the first or second day, it's good. But about that 10th or 15th day when it's chocolate milk, he's right. Wind out of the west, stay home and rest, because it's already churned up out there, you know. But that's what's nice about flamingos. You have all that other fish. They don't even notice the west wind because they're protected in Hell's Bay and Lane Bay. You know, that's what makes for me wanting to move from the Keys and Homestead and go to Naples. It's a tough one because we're spoiled here in South Florida. I mean, oh, today's out of the west. Well, let's go to Biscayne National Park and go bone fishing. You know, hey, wind's out of the east. You know, tides are good. We go to Key Largo, Flamingo. Oh, it's out of the west. You still want to catch snook? We're so spoiled. You know, if it's I noticed that a lot in tarpon during the migration. Is if wind's out of the west, it's gonna be slicked out oceanside, perfect. You know, and you go fish other places and it's like, man, wind out of the west in Chuggalusky. What do you do? Or in 10,000 Islands, because everything's muddy, you know. So I notice over here in Naples, when it's out of the west, those guys really don't fish, you know, because there's nowhere to hide as much, you know, unless you go into the backwaters. And if it's in the wrong part of the year, the fishing back there is not going to be that great either, you know. So that's what's so tough about learning fisheries where we live in the Keys, is that we have so much stuff to do. You know, I mean, it's an easy thing to do if you're in Key Largo, like, let's go fish Key West in the morning for a couple hours. You know, that's the wind, you follow the tide. You know, you see a lot of guys in Alamorada that there's days that you'll see them and they're on their trailer. Well, that's because the tide way down there was perfect for permanent bone fishing. And it's easier to trailer down, be there, catch bonefish and permanent, and go home. You know, so we're really spoiled, and we take it for granted sometimes. You know,
Can you follow the tide as far as let's say one tide is low tide at 8 in the morning, and then a little farther down the tide is a little bit later? I mean, that it takes some time to figure it out. Like, I'm still learning some areas. Like, if you notice, when, like, I have some areas past Tin Can Channel that I've learned hold a lot of fish nowadays. They used to back in the day. Now they're starting to get back. When it's outgoing in Tin Can or off a snake bite, when I get there, that place is usually out of the water. So I've learned now, when it's at the peak high tide, that's when, or right before peak high tide on snakebite is when I need to get. So it's about an hour, 2 hour difference. And you'll notice a lot when you're fishing, you know, Channel 2 Bridge, and I'm fishing Barnes Key or First National Bank. Okay, listen, it's outgoing here. If I finish this outgoing here, I can still get to Channel 2 and it's still incoming. It hasn't completely changed yet, you know. And that's why you see all these flats boats now with these 200 Mercuries on the back of them doing like 80 miles an hour for a tarpon migration, because they're chasing that tide for those tarpon. You know, they're always, especially in the migration, they're always going to swim whether north or south, but you do have tides that they kind of gather up, and they'll always, you know, during Sandbar Sundays, I have a spot that I get ran over by wave runners one after the other, but as long as the tide is there, during COVID, going by myself, I was jumping 2 to 3 fish within a couple hours by myself on fly. And I figured it out. Okay, those fish don't really mind the boat as much.
they know it's there, but those fish are so used to it. They're older than us. I'm sure they've seen a boat or a wave runner before.
Right.
You know, it doesn't make for ideal, setup, but I noticed that those fish are there every time at that same tide. So that allows you to chase those tides, and which helps because there is difference. Tavernier Key compared to Whale Harbor, even though you think they're both oceanside to bayside, there still is some differences in tide when they're happening, which is pretty interesting, especially when it comes to bonefish. The bonefish on a what would it be, outgoing, they're feeding into the current, everything coming off it, and then high tide they're belly crawling around or sitting still. Certain things to look for. Permit fishing, they're fishing on the edge of the flats, feeding onto it. So yeah, it all adds up to help out in catching.
Yeah, just it's all about learning and time on the water, and keeping track.
The time on the water, and you see these guys. If you got some of these best guys, they're on the water every day. When you don't go on the water every day, or on like 1 or 2 times a week, you can't get into a pattern. You start to. I don't really stray much away. That's what stinks for me, is I don't really explore unless I'm by myself or with a buddy, because I stick to my routine. My routine works. I have certain tides that I hit. If it's reversed, I just flip them and go to somewhere else first. And there are guys out there that go and explore, and you can catch fish exploring. I'm not saying it's just there's that you have that 60% or 70% that you might not catch that fish. Especially in Hell's Bay, you can pull all day and barely see a quarter of it. So if you're exploring and you're not going to catch a lot of fish, or you might catch a 50-incher. But so I try to stick to what works, and if it still works for me, then that's what we'll stick to.
Like I did last time in Coop Bay, I went to another area. I mean, I knew where I found fish before, but I said, you know what? Let's go over here. Mainly, then I went in there, and from 100 yards out, I could see tarpon busting. They were feeding on, which was kind of tough. They were feeding on a little minnow, tiny minnows. But I told the guy that was with me, if we get one to eat, that will be a miracle. We didn't have fly rods, which we messed up.
And that's the tough part. A lot of those little tarpon and snook, they get used to eating little things because to them, it's like the alpha. They can destroy it. That's something small, I'll inhale it. So you'll notice, like in that area, I will use more like little baby paddle tails, like DOA paddle tails or saltwater assassins, with either a weighted weedless hook or a weedless non-weighted hook, and skipping it up near the trees and working it. When you see them roll, throw right at the roll. They'll eat it. They're all those little. The problem is that they're learning how to eat, so they don't have that commitment, and they'll blow it out of the water and miss it completely. Because they're still learning how to eat, but they're aggressive. They're really mostly eating off a reaction. Something hits, they turn around and eat it. They don't even know what it was, but they just saw it splash. Right. But and sometimes there too, like a little jig head with a paddle tail or a gulp shrimp works too, because you can. It gives them something to chase. And Coop Bay, I had a client probably a month or 2 ago. No, it was before COVID, so it was longer than that. So redfish have come back in Coop Bay. They're not a lot there, but we ran across a couple very big ones that pushing 35, 38 inches. I saw one in there that was really, really red, and he didn't look like he looked like a Louisiana redfish, pushing a wake, looked like he was getting on plane, and I said, that's a redfish. He had one eat, and he blew the shot, and I was like, because that's something you don't really see. You used to catch them there, but they're small. You used to have black drum there, and they disappeared the last couple of years, and I'm starting to see the black drum again, sheep's head. So the fishery on the inside, whatever's going on is working.
Well, the water does look beautiful. I mean, it looks. Last time we were out there, it looked spectacular, clear, clean, tannish.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
That
It
was-
looks good. There's some big fish in there too. You can hear them popping at a high tide. Unfortunately, high tide means that they're all the way in the back, you know.
right.
But there are some big fish back in there still, you know. And you have the old timers there used to always be a boat there, coming in occasionally in the wintertime it looked like it was made for you know, another area. It wasn't made for flamingo, but 8-pound, 10-pound snook. You know, he fishes that one area, and it's always like that. You know.
Anybody else have any questions for him at all? I think the farther he gets away, we might lose him up the street. Tom, we can't hear you.
I always like to ask, you know, what boat
Yeah.
he takes people out on and what he charges.
Did we lose him?
Maybe Ryan. No, hold on.
They're in name only.
He'll come back. There he is. All right, Ryan. So tell us where we can get information on how to contact you for a charter.
Yeah. Rex was asking.
You can go to my website. You can go to my website at
Say it again.
It's right here.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
You're in now, but go ahead.
Put it on
This is their
the,
website, Deep South.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
deepsouthfishingcharters.com. And I fish off of a Hells Bay Professional and a Marquesa, and I charge for a full day $650, and for a half day I believe it's $500. And there's certain times of the year that I recommend, like the half day in the summertime, just because it's so hot. My problem is that I'm a full-time type of guy. I'll sun up to sundown. That tends to be an issue because everybody has to go home to their wives, you know. So you don't want to miss dinner. But
Okay.
but other than that, yeah, on that website has my phone number, or if you need some ideas on what the fish are doing, or if you want to get out there on the water and go fishing, you can give me a holler and I'll be around. And if I can't do it, I can get in touch with someone that can get you out there. Like Jason, I follow Jason's lead. He's an amazing fishing guy. That guy he speaks fish. You know, he blows me away with his tarpon skills. It's unbelievable. You know, so I try to learn from someone like him. You know, so whenever I can help and learn from him and help others, I'm all for it.
Ryan, would it be okay if we add you to our email list?
Oh yeah, of course.
Then you'll
That'd be
see
perfect.
when we do outings and anywhere in Flamingo or something, we usually get together afterwards for a barbecue and stuff. You're always welcome to come.
Oh, right on. That's awesome.
Ryan, when you get a
Okay, good
chance, if you go to YouTube, search for South Dade Anglers as one word, and you'll see
Okay.
our channel, and you'll see your presentation with a couple of others, and also our outings.
The speed might be lower. All right. Sounds good. Yeah, definitely South Dade might be losing. You got okay. I know it's
Right.
getting dark to see me.
Yeah, we're losing you.
All right, so we're going to have to let you go. You're coming in and out right now.
All right. I
Thank you for
appreciate
taking
it.
the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much,
Oh.
Ryan. Thank you.
No problem. Reach out to me whenever.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.